Hello, everyone. Welcome to Scholarship and Practice Web's lecture series. The topic for today will be supporting pre-service and in-service teachers, mentorship and coaching. We are honored to have you here today, and we can't wait to get things started. First, we'll do an introduction. My name is Dr. Jabari Taylor. I work in the EMS department, which is early childhood, multilingual, and special education. I'm currently work in the PPP department, which is a paraprofessional pathway project program, where I am the PPP program coordinator. So pretty much I oversee the program in its entirety. Also, today we have my colleague, Dr. Kathleen Laurie, here as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Catherine Laurie. I am an assistant professor in special education in the Department of Early Childhood, Multilingual, and Special Education. It's always so long. I have to think
Yeah.
about it. I primarily work with the autism population and students with more significant disabilities. I do a lot of work with teachers, paraprofessionals in schools to support them in implementing evidence-based practices. And today I'm really excited to share some coaching tips with my wonderful colleague, Dr. Jabari Taylor. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we get started, we really are interested in knowing a little bit about the audience. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, maybe in the chat? Brief responses if you can.
So we'll give everyone about a minute or so. If you can just chat in the box would be awesome.
Welcome, Ryan, teacher in high school. Brandon, also high school. Dr. Morgan in
Hello,
our
everyone.
department.
Thank you for joining us.
Riley is special education. And UNLV wrestling team. Wow. Sangwoo from Purdue. Hi, Sangwoo.
We have Steve, instructional
Steve,
coach.
math teacher. Wonderful. I think that's it. So we have kind of a mix of teachers and some other roles.
Awesome, awesome. So I'll be going first, and I'll be speaking today on mentoring pre-service teachers. So on the next slide, we'll just kind of discuss what is mentorship. So if everyone in the chat, if you could kind of just share your thoughts for a second or two, what is mentorship to you, or what do you think it is as defined? Also, while you're sharing, if you want to just kind of think about what approaches or other styles you're currently using towards mentorship would be awesome. Sharing knowledge, awesome. Thank you so much. Brandon mentioned guidance and support for others, co-teaching, co-learning. Ryan mentioned mentorship, sharing knowledge as well. Other supports, awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing. This is great information. So on the next slide, we will just discuss now what is mentorship. So the definition of what mentor has changed over time. So as of now, mentorship is the practice of someone with a strong background of wisdom, expertise, and providing help, support, counseling, and advice to someone over a period of time. So I just want to note as well, just because someone wants to be a mentor doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person for the job. If you think about it, if you need background or wisdom and expertise, those things take time to they develop over time. So someone who is a new teacher or it maybe only been in the field maybe a year or two may not be the best option for a mentee when in terms of mentorship. On the next slide, we will just kind of discuss what is a good mentor. A good mentor collaborates, demonstrates positive interactions with their colleagues and mentee. You should also consider they accomplish this by engaging in two-way conversation, not simply just delivering information. So if you think about it, it should be in terms, it's not a one-way street. Information goes both ways. A good mentor also encourages ongoing communication and discussion where knowledge is shared between the two parties. I would also mention throughout this active discourse of information, new knowledge can emerge where the mentee and the mentor benefit from and learn from each other. And so I just want to take a step back for a minute because I mentioned positive interactions. What exactly is positive interactions? So this can be in form of the mentor just offering help or guidance. For instance, think about when you were a beginning teacher. It's hard to just walk up to someone and ask for things. It's kind of uncomfortable. You don't really know where to start. So as a mentor, it'll be very helpful if you go out and just offer these things and don't wait for them to come to you for them. So on the next slide, we're just going to dig into kind of the overview of the coaching approaches. This is broken down into seven domains. Um, um, the domains emerge from the literature when discussing important aspects of mentoring pre-service teachers. So I'll go through each domain in detail, starting with domain one, which is collaborating with the university. So on the next slide, what exactly is collaborating with the university? So collaborating with the university is a critical component mentors can employ to ensure a positive teaching experience for the mentee. Overall, if you think about it, the vision of what good teaching looked like should be shared by the mentor and the university. Additionally, the roles and responsibilities of each person in the party should be thoroughly communicated, and this will help avoid any confusion or unnecessary challenges. It may be in the best vision of what it may be best if the vision of what teaching looks like should be reviewed briefly before debriefs. And you may ask, what exactly does this look like? I may recommend you should have a schedule set during these debriefs where you know exactly the talking points you're going to discuss. With one of the talking points can be what good teaching looks like specifically. Therefore, after each debrief, before each debrief, you and your mentee, are on the same page. So on the next slide, so we're just moving on to domain two, developing a disposition and professional knowledge and mentoring. So if you think about it, experienced teachers are often assumed to be will make the quality mentor. However, this is not the case. A mentor should have a level of commitment for developing a disposition and professional knowledge and mentoring. Um, Additionally, they may exhibit a strong subject and content knowledge and be willing to share their knowledge with that pre-service teacher. So just because someone wants to do it, they have to be willing to put in this work as wanting to share their knowledge. Most importantly, they might intrinsically motivate to take on the role of the mentor teacher. Ultimately, the research has shown that intrinsically motivated mentors will have a more positive relationship with the in-service teacher. So on the next slide, we will discuss domain three, which is establishing an effective relationship with the pre-service teacher. So experiencing an effective relationship with the pre-service teacher is a key is a key component of a successful partnership. How do we do this? Mentors can try to connect with the pre-service teacher at a personal level. They should possess good listening skills and ask questions if they don't understand. In developing a reciprocal relationship with the mentee, by doing this, the pre-service teacher can feel more comfortable and be more at ease when asking mentor questions that can help them enhance their learning experience. So I would just like to reiterate, ask questions when you're unsure, and do your homework. Research so you're familiar with the mentee's culture. This way you'll be aware of the best way to give guidance and also to receive that feedback as well. So, and moving on to domain four, which is facilitating pre-service teacher learning. Facilitating pre-service teacher learning is an important part of mentorship, as we all know. This can be done by encouraging reflective practices and by giving the pre-service teacher the tools they need. Accordingly, mentor teachers should be responsive to the learning and strength and challenges of that mentor and how they facilitate learning accordingly. So you may want to ask yourself, what does responsive to learning strength and challenges of the mentor, what does that even really mean? So if you think about it, it includes just giving the pre-service teacher praise when they're doing something good or something is going well for them. And on the opposite, giving them corrective action feedback when the pre-service teacher may be struggling in a specific area. So if you just give them feedback, even if it's positive or negative, but just giving them that corrective feedback earlier rather than later. So on the next slide, we will discuss domain 5, which is modeling. Modeling is one of my favorites because I believe when you see something, it's a lot easier to understand it. So domain 5, modeling effective teaching and making connections between theory and practice. Modeling how to effectively teach is essential for the mentor to demonstrate for the pre-service teacher. Pre-service teachers can learn quality learning and teaching through modeling. The mentor teacher should also have an ample amount of understanding of the theory and how to apply it in everyday situations. And this kind of goes back when I mentioned earlier that it wouldn't be necessarily the best option for a first or second year teacher to be a mentor because they haven't really had time to develop those skills, because some things with teaching just kind of develops over time. With that being said, you may ask, what is really the meaning of understanding theory and how to apply it in everyday teaching situations? Well, if you think about it in terms of modeling, we say your teacher should model this. Well, model exactly what are we exactly modeling? You should demonstrate enthusiasm and passion for the job. How do we teach diverse and inclusion situations? And also, how do we self-evaluate and reflect? So modeling isn't just, as a mentor, I get on the board, I teach a lesson, and that's the end of it. It's a lot more deeper in terms of it. So if you're not willing to really fulfill those necessary steps, that person may not really be the best mentor. And on the next slide, we'll just discuss domain 6, which is providing direction and support. Providing direction and support appropriately can be vulnerable for mentors when supervising a pre-service teacher. And if you think about it, in student teaching, pre-service teachers will experience emotional ups and downs, so to say. We know this. We kind of know some of them. We don't know some of them, but we're kind of familiar with what that looks like. With that being said, mentors can provide not only instructional support, but we can provide emotional support as well. And we can do this by being empathetic and showing support on how to better address situations that are similar the next time they may arise. In terms of research, it shows that support can be enhanced by engaging in face-to-face conversations where resources are shared. And I just want to highlight when we say face-to-face. I would like to note Zoom and Google Meet they're excellent platforms. We can do a lot with them. However, best practice for mentorship should include in-person meetings. In-person meetings bring the climate of the meeting more to life and lead to better understanding and receptiveness of feedback from both parties. So I know they're great. We can be a lot of places. However, best practices, it should be face-to-face mentorship. Also, I just want to note one surprisingly but significant finding was the success of professional experience is determined by the level of mentor support a pre-service teacher receives rather than the number of hours he or she spends on placement. So I just want to read that again because I think that's very, very important. So the significant finding was that on professional experience, it is determined by the level of mentor support a pre-service teacher receives rather than the number of hours he or she spends on placement. So with that being said, we'll go into domain 7, which is the final domain. Domain 7 is using a progressive mindset and supporting pre-service teachers to nurture teacher identity. So a progressive mindset of a mentor, it enhances the pre-service teacher experience. The mentor teacher can help do this by, they need to be adaptable, flexible. They need to help support the pre-service teacher and finding their own teacher identity and style. I just want to note as well, feedback should tell the pre-service teacher what they need to work on or improve, and then you give suggestions. Not necessarily direct the pre-service teacher how to do it. They should find their own style, which builds the mentee's teacher identity. So you should kind of point them in the right direction. However, you should kind of let them find the back end of it on their own, because if you really think about it as a mentor or a mentee, how many of us really teach the same? We mentor the same. We all kind of have our own style. So it's even when you're observing someone, I always tell my students, you observe, you kind of take what works for you. That may not work for you. You just take a little bit from everybody, and you kind of build your own teaching identity, so to say. And further, so how does this support happen? The mentor teacher should be open-minded. The mentor teacher should encourage the mentor to also try new things. I know a lot of mentors are out of the classroom or later in their careers, and it's hard to kind of think back at the time when you were a pre-service teacher. So in terms of that, just think about just because of something didn't work for you, that doesn't mean it won't work for the pre-service teacher. So just kind of be open-minded, encourage them to try new things, because just because it didn't work from you, it might come from a different lens. Students might see it differently, and it might work for them. So on the next slide, I just want to kind of discuss a couple of slides. I want to discuss a few components of good mentorship. First, encouragement and support. A lot of people hear support as a mentor. They think in the classroom, how do I teach? How can I teach them how to read? However, I just want to note, emotional support may be a little bit more important than instructional support, because if we don't mentally have that support, it's kind of hard for them to kind of make it through. It's a lot to learn when you're first learning a new skill or a new position. So just kind of put yourself in their shoes and think about, what does it look like from their point of view. And on the next slide, we're just going to discuss open relationship. Student teachers highly value having open line of communication with their mentors. It helps to encourage the mentee to come to the mentor for guidance. So if they don't really have a good relationship, they were more likely not to reach out. However, if you have an open relationship with that person, they feel more comfortable to ask you these questions, even though it might not be the answer they would like to hear. They still feel comfortable reaching out to you because they know you'll be honest and upfront and let them know exactly what they need to work on, and maybe the best way to go about it as well. And on the next slide, we just want to touch on feedback. The significance of continuous feedback should be given in small portions rather than at one big debrief. Give the mentee a chance to process small portions of information at a time. So consider how a large amount of feedback can become really overwhelming. So if throughout the day, you can just give steady feedback. Hey, maybe you should work on this, you should work on here, and not as much of a lump sum at one time, because it's very hard to process that much information. And honestly, the mentee will more than likely to take it the wrong way, because it kind of will make them feel like they're doing everything wrong. So just kind of remember too to kind of give the positive, negative feedback as well. You kind of go back and forth. And on the next slide, just a few tips I want to leave you with before my colleague takes over. I just want to make sure you're conscious of. Make sure as a mentor, you have to be available. If you're not available, you're not a mentor. So you have to be available, and you should also make it clear how are you going to be available to the mentee, whether that be a text message, a phone call, a Google Doc, email. So just be upfront and let them know what is the best way for you all to go about it. And secondly, remember, you need to be understanding. This goes back to, it's a different day and age and time. Things have changed. Just because it didn't work for you, that doesn't mean it won't work for them. So just be understanding, open-minded. Third, form a relationship. The better your relationship, the more likely they're to come to you for information. And it works out for both parties, because not only does the mentee learn, the mentor learns as well. So the more engagement you have in conversation, the better the relationship and the better the feedback and the receptiveness of the feedback can be. And lastly, remember just to be positive. We have to show them that teaching is a great job. Let them see how much you love it. It's a great career. We want them to be around for a long time. We don't want them to leave the field in 2 or 3 years, burned out or anything of that nature. So, just keep a positive attitude. We know that there's ups or downs. Sometimes it's not the best day. It won't be your worst day. It comes and goes in waves. So just remember, stay positive. And on the next slide, we'll kind of just lead this further in. But if you have any quick questions, I can start to answer some questions in the chat, and Dr. Lauren will take over and she will start discussing mentorship as well. So great question. What are some potential examples or suggestions for initially identifying a mentee needs? I would say just honestly, just speaking with the mentee, build that relationship, because they're the ones that kind of know exactly what they need. So once you build that relationship with them, it kind of just goes from there. So, just do things, reach out, ask them how they're doing. Just really ask them, do they need anything? It might seem kind of overwhelming at times, but just ask, maybe it's once a day, they might need 2 a day, but you'll kind of get the feel of that person the more you kind of work with them, and you'll kind of know what they need. You'll kind of see it as time goes along. But great question. Thank you for asking.
I think we have one more question in the
Okay, yeah, I'll
chat.
answer one more question and then I'll let Dr. Lauren take over. So the next question is, how do you know you have the right mentor? You will know if we have the right mentor by the mentee. If they will let you, if they don't feel comfortable, or if they don't feel comfortable with that person, they'll usually start to reach out to the next person for help. So for example, as a coordinator in a PPP, if someone doesn't feel comfortable, they'll kind of skip over to that next person and start to reach out for help. And that's you'll kind of know there's an issue. Then I usually will refer them back to that teacher. And then if an issue still arises, then I will kind of know from there, it maybe need to be some type of gradation, or we'll intervene and just kind of have a conversation to kind of know what's going on. And thank you for that question as well. All right. Dr. Laura, whenever
Great.
I'll start answering questions in the chat and you can just take off from here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for your insightful suggestions and tips on mentoring pre-service teachers. The next section we have in this session is on coaching in-service teachers, so teachers who are currently teaching. Next slide, please. And I first want to talk about why it is important and why is there even a need for us to coach in-service teachers, right? They already received training before they became teachers. They are licensed to be teachers, and therefore they're teachers in the classrooms. But why do they still need coaching? Research has shown that job-embedded coaching has been shown to be really effective for improving teachers or educators' implementations of evidence-based practices, meaning practices that are recommended or supported by research. And coaching is usually much more effective than one-stop workshop because you get to develop a relationship over time between the coach and the coachee. It's not just a 1 hour, 3 hour thing. And you are able to target specific skills and have practice over and over across time. You can also have the time and opportunities to reflect on current practices that the teacher is implementing. And you would also have opportunities for you to provide feedback as a coach to the teacher, and the teacher would get to improve on a practice based on your feedback over multiple opportunities. So all of these components of coaching really make coaching usually much more effective than brief workshops or brief online trainings. I know we're doing a webinar, which is kind of a one-stop workshop right now, but what I'm saying is research has really shown that if you really want to build on skills and you want teachers to be implementing evidence-based practices in a way that's sustainable and maintained over time, then coaching is usually a more effective method. So we're going to talk a little bit more about coaching. But first, I want to get a feel of your thoughts on why you might think pre-service and in-service teachers are different and they may need different types of coaching or mentorship. Can you share your thoughts in the chat? A lot of you are teachers right now, so maybe you can think back to when you were teachers in training, or maybe you can think about some of the student teachers that you've had in class. Okay, Steve shared, as a pre-service teacher, I didn't know what I didn't know. That is true. So it takes a lot more guidance. In-service teachers often face real-life situations that they're a little different from pre-service teachers when they're practicing to be teachers. Good. So pre-service teachers are often having their first experiences in the classroom, but in-service teachers are really working, towards making progress and making sure that they're meeting school goals. Great. In-service teachers are often looking for coaching relating to a specific content or specific component of the practice that they're wanting to improve their skills on. So I'm seeing this as in-service teachers often know what they want to improve on. They already have an idea of what they're lacking, what they need to work on. And pre-service teachers tend to be focusing on teaching more globally. Great, all wonderful responses. So you can see a little bit of the difference, right? When we are training pre-service teachers, we are mentoring them differently than if we would provide coaching for in-service teachers, because they have very different needs. The context is really different. They have different responsibilities, and they have a different range of experiences. And that all should be taken into account when you are providing coaching as professional development for current teachers. Good. So next slide. For the purpose of this session, there are many coaching frameworks and models that are effective, but for the purpose of this session, I'm going to introduce one coaching framework, practice-based coaching, that I have used before that I found to be very effective. And this was a coaching framework developed by Snyder and colleagues a few years ago. So practice-based coaching really emphasizes, as you can see in the diagram here, at the center of it is effective practices. So we have to be focusing on practices that are recommended and supported by research. And then, as you can see in the outer circle, there's collaborative partnerships. And that really is a key to practice-based coaching, emphasizing the collaborative partnership between the coach and the coachee rather than a hierarchical relationship, right? So we're seeing the coachee as an expert in things as well. We're seeing the coachee as being able to contribute really valuably to the coaching relationship. And again, focusing on teaching practices. And then you see the three components there, starting with shared goals and planning, followed by focused observation, and then reflection and feedback. So it's kind of a cyclical process. You set a goal, you conduct observations, you engage in reflection and feedback until you meet your goal. And then maybe you set the next goal, or maybe you need to adjust your goal, right? So I'm going to be talking about all of these components in more detail. Next slide. So again, I want to emphasize that coaching in-service teachers is a lot about collaboration. I am seeing the teacher as an expert in classroom matters, as an expert in the school policies and procedures that they're at, as an expert in, the students, because they see them every day and work with them every day. As an instructional coach, or as someone who's coming into the classroom for maybe, 10 minutes a day, right? You don't get a lot of opportunities to get to know the students as well as the teachers do. So I really want coaches here, or people who are going to be coaches to teachers, to really see the coaching relationship as a potential collaboration instead of, oh, I'm an expert and I'm teaching you all the things that you need to know. So collaboration is really key in this framework. So how do you actually collaborate with teachers to make it really meaningful? You do have to acknowledge that teachers really know their classrooms best, and they are actually the most important figure in that classroom, right? They are leading that classroom. They're responsible for the climate of that classroom. They're responsible for the well-being of their students and the academic outcomes of their students in that classroom. So they really are the most important figure in that classroom because students look up to them. So you have to provide space for the teacher to share their knowledge and skills and experience. I think it's really important to consider those, because as an in-service teachers, they know what they need to work on. They have certain ideas about how they want to be coached. They have certain ideas about how they want to work on their teaching practices to improve on them. So I think really considering what their preferences and priorities are would be really helpful for developing a collaborative coaching partnership. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next component in practice-based coaching that I want to talk about is goal setting and action planning. And the key word here is shared. So again, it's a collaborative relationship. It's not hierarchical. So both of you have equal say in everything, and you should be making joint decisions. And I think that's one way of really respecting the teacher's expertise and experience and preferences. So when you're setting a goal, you want it to be a shared goal, right? It has to be something that the teacher really values and the teacher wants to work on. And that really helps with the motivation as well, right? So if the teacher is agreeable on the goal and they really want to work on something, then they're more likely to be motivated to achieve that goal. Action planning just means that shared action planning also means that you have to establish a plan that's agreeable to the teacher and something that's feasible and reasonable for the teacher. So everything, all of the decisions here have to be shared to make this coaching relationship effective. Next slide. So next, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about what's a good goal, right? It's really easy to say set a goal, but a lot of the times we set goals that are not so great. So thinking about what makes a good goal, it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, and it has to be achievable. And how do we check for that? Next slide, please. I have a couple of examples here. The first example is here. Daisy will improve the implementation of a class-wide token economy after 2 weeks. Do you think this is a good goal or a bad goal? Is it specific, measurable, and achievable? Can you share your thoughts in the chat? It can be as simple as a yes, no. Improve is not measurable, good. Okay, so we all generally agree that this is not the most amazing goal and you shouldn't be writing this kind of goal. All right, next slide. So how about this goal? Is it specific, measurable, and achievable? Someone said I will use that in my class. Good. Where, by who? Good. So a little bit more about the context would be helpful. Great. So these are 3 things that I really want you to look at when you're setting a goal, right? It's basically writing a good IEP goal. You do the same when you're coaching a teacher or when you're a teacher and you're being coached, right? You want the goal to be specific. It has to be measurable so that you can measure it and evaluate it. And it has to be achievable. You want it to be something that's reasonable and not something that you cannot achieve, because that definitely does not help with motivation. Good. Next slide, please. So next, you have a goal. Now you have to have an action plan to make the goal happen, right? So let's take a look at some examples to see if the action plan is actionable. So next slide, we have an example here. So Tanaya, the coach, will send Nigel, the coachee, a video example of Lisimo's prompting, which is a teaching practice. Nigel will practice Lisimo's prompting and reflect on his implementation. Do you think this action plan is actionable? Meaning, do you exactly know what you need to do if you look at these written steps? So Saul will share that if I were a coachee, so I was thinking about, putting yourself in the shoes of the teacher, I would like to have more specific expectations, like a checklist. Good. Any other comments? Okay, let's take a look at the next slide with more examples. Do you think this action plan, if you have it on a plan, can you actually implement these steps? So the coach will send the coachee a video example of a teaching practice. Nigel, the coachee, will watch the video example. The coachee will then jot down 3 levels of prompting that's appropriate for students in math. So that's the context. Nigel will then practice implementing this practice, Lisimo's prompting, with a paraprofessional, and Tanaya, the coach, will provide in vivo or in-person feedback. How do these steps sound? Someone said actionable. Good. Any other thoughts? Good. Wonderful. So this will be an example of an action plan that's reasonably actionable. So the next component in practice-based coaching is focused observation and then reflection and feedback. So the key word here is really focused. Again, we want to be focusing on effective and evidence-based teaching practices. So your observation, your reflection, your feedback, all of it should be focused on specific teaching practices. Next slide, please. So how do you stay focused in your coaching? You have to align your observation and data collection with a shared goal. Remember, you set a goal at first, right? And then you have action plans. So you have where you need to go, you have how you need what you need to get there. So when you observe the teacher implementing practices and you collect data on it, you want to make sure that you're observing things that are relevant with the shared goal and action plan, right? You don't want to go all over the place. When I walk into the classroom, I can see 1,000 different things happening, but I don't want all of that to be, to be in discussion with my coaching meetings because that's not going to be constructive. I want to make sure that when I conduct my observations, when I collect data, I am really focused on what the teacher wants to improve, right? The goal that the teacher and I set together, all of the action plans, and then thinking about whether the teacher is meeting that goal. So again, being focused also means that you have to use your observation data or observation examples to facilitate the reflection and feedback process. When you're providing feedback, you don't want to be providing feedback on 20 different things. You want to make sure that you have data to back up your feedback. You observe something that's done very well or that's done, not so well. Then you provide feedback on those things, right? So that your feedback is really database and you are making database decisions with the teacher. Facilitating reflection is really kind of the meat or, the main component of practice-based coaching, in my opinion, because that is really the thing that's going to drive the teacher to do a little bit better in certain practices. So I think I wanted to spend a little bit more time covering this. Reflection is going to be effective when you use open-ended questions to guide reflection. So instead of a question that's going to result in yes, no responses, use open-ended questions. What do you think went well? Instead of asking, do you think this went well, right? So the teacher can always say yes or no, right? So if you keep it open-ended, it will really help with the teacher to reflect on their practices more openly and more honestly with you. You can ask them, how do you feel about something? How do you feel about implementing something? And you can always connect it back to student outcomes. How do you think the students responded to something or a teaching practice that you implemented as a new practice? And what would you like to work on instead of, do you want to work on this? Do you want to work on that? Those are closed-ended questions. Ask open-ended questions. What would you like to work on? So all of these types of open-ended questions really help the teacher be kind of in the driver's seat and really drive what they want to work on, how they want to improve certain practices. And it helps them, it helps keep them motivated in enhancing their teaching practices. And it helps keep the reflection really open and honest. You also have to acknowledge the coachee's statements and perspectives, even though they could be different from yours, right? It's possible that the teacher's reflection of what happened in the classroom is a little bit different from your observations or a little bit different from your opinions of what happened, but it's okay. There are always going to be differences and maybe some disagreements, but making sure that you are maintaining a collaborative relationship and healthy coaching relationship with the teacher means that you also have to acknowledge the coachee's statements and perspectives, even if they're different. Next slide, please. So you engage in some discussion to evoke some reflection, and now you want to provide feedback. And as Dr. Taylor said, that applies to mentoring pre-service teachers. You want to provide both positive and negative feedback. Same with coaching in-service teachers. You want to provide both positive and negative feedback, or what I call here supportive and constructive feedback. Providing supportive feedback means that you are providing good feedback of what the teacher implemented really well of. So for example, maybe you observe that there's increased student engagement, there's more task completion, the students are having more correct responses, and maybe there's less disruptive behavior in the classroom. So all of these are things that you can note in your observation and provide as specific examples to what the teacher implemented well. So make sure you always provide at least, a few pieces of supportive feedback in your reflection of teaching practices with the teacher so that they know what they have done well and they would continue doing those things. Constructive feedback, I think, is the hardest part of the coaching relationship, especially when you are coaching an experienced or a seasoned teacher, right? They're not new, they're not pre-service teachers. they have a lot of opinions and perspectives, and rightfully so, because, it's their classroom, they're in charge. They are the expert in their classroom. So sometimes it can be a little bit hard for you to provide constructive feedback. But here are some ways for you to make sure that the constructive feedback is not taken personally as much as possible. Use your observation notes and data to supplement your feedback. So when you conduct an observation, it has to be focused on the specific teaching practices that the teacher wants to work on, right? And then when you provide constructive feedback, you want to make sure that you're hitting on those things that are relevant to the goal that the teacher set, right? When you set a shared goal together, the teacher, you have teacher buy-in, the teacher is on board. So when you provide feedback on those specific things, it is more likely that the feedback is going to be taken well. You also want to make sure that you're highlighting the importance of the practice that you're reflecting or providing feedback on, right? For example, if you're working on, building a better reinforcement system in the classroom for students so that you're promoting more positive behaviors with the students, then you want to highlight the importance of why is it important to, set up a really good reinforcement system? Why can't we use punishment procedures, right? You want to highlight the importance of the specific teaching practice, because then it helps the teachers see the relevance and impact of that practice that it would have on their students. When you provide suggestions for improvement, it is really important to ask the coachee or the teacher which strategy or next step they prefer, right? Again, going back to their preferences and their priorities, you probably have a ton of suggestions, a ton of things that you think the teacher can work on or the teacher can do to implement their teaching practices. But you always want to be respectful of the teacher's preferences and perspective. So give them a few options and ask them, which strategy do you want to use to help improve this specific teaching practice? And I think that can be really helpful in, again, keeping the teacher motivated in actually doing what you suggest them to do. So that was practice-based coaching, very briefly, right? Effective practices at the center of it. You need to build collaborative partnerships and see the teacher as a collaborator and a partner. And then you engage in shared goals and planning so that the teacher is on board with every step of the coaching. And you conduct observations that are focused, and you engage in reflection and provide feedback that's open and both supportive and constructive. So that is the end of our session. We talked a little bit about mentoring pre-service teachers. Dr. Taylor had a lot of good tips about how you can mentor pre-service teachers as they try to develop their identity as a teacher. And I talked a little bit about coaching in-service teachers. You want to try to utilize their experience, their strengths, and their preferences. And collaboration is really the key to making the coaching relationship successful with in-service teachers. So we have a little bit of time for question and answers. If you have any questions and you want to speak up, you are welcome to raise your hand. Or if you have questions and you want to type them in the chat, we would be really happy to address them as well. So we have a question in the chat from Ryan. How would you sell the idea of mentoring to teachers with potential? So do you mean current teachers? Oh, recruiting current professionals to be mentors. Okay. So Dr. Taylor, feel free to jump in if you have different responses. I think it's really important for an effective coaching relationship for both the coach and the coachee to be on board. So you can't really force anybody to be coached, or you can't really force anybody to become the coach if they're not willing to. So I think some level of it has to come from their personal motivations. Do they have personal motivations to engage in coaching, or do they have professional motivations to engage in coaching, right? Maybe becoming an instructional coach or coaches to other teachers is beneficial for their career development. So maybe that's something that you can try to sell to them. Or maybe they really like, building connections with other professionals or early professionals in the field. And that could be something you try to sell to them, right? Because mentorship and coaching is really about building a lot of relationships. And through those relationships helping people develop professionally.
Just to piggyback off what Dr. Lori said, you can't really force anybody to want to be a mentorship. However, in terms of trying to sell the idea, you can just think about that they'll be mentoring somebody. However, there is a lot of learning that will come on their end as well in this process. So not just the mentee learns things, the mentor learns things as well. So you kind of sell it as it's kind of can help them grow in the profession as well.
That's a really good point. So I think a lot of people might be a little bit reluctant to become instructional coaches or mentors for other people because they're a little bit intimidated by the role, right? Am I good enough or am I an expert enough to be a coach? But as Dr. Taylor said, if you try to sell it as a learning experience as well, right? This is a learning experience for both the coachee and the coach. Then maybe that will be appealing to some people. Another question, is there a resource available online for practice-based coaching, including specific examples in areas such as classroom management? So practice-based coaching, there are a lot of research articles that have demonstrated practice-based or evaluated practice-based coaching with classroom management practices, but most of them are in the early childhood setting. So maybe if that's something you're interested, you should be able to find it. There is also a whole book on practice-based coaching. It's not a thick book. It's a reasonable book that you can purchase if you're interested and you really want to make that investment. There are a lot of good materials and resources that you can take from that book if you are trying to implement practice-based coaching as a coach. Next slide. So if you come up with any questions or you think of anything else, you are very welcome to contact either one of us. So here's our contact information. And we would like to help advertise for the next webinar in this series. Feel free to sign up if you're interested in this topic.
Again, I just want to say thank you for everyone that joined us today. I was really excited about it. Me and Dr. Lori were both really excited. I had an awesome time. Thank you, Dr. Lori. This has been an awesome ride working with you. So anytime if there's something you want to do, thank you as well.
It's been really wonderful. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you, Dr. Taylor, for sharing your thoughts on mentorship.
Thank you, everyone.